current liabilities from the target balance sheet. The way that you group a column is you go into data and you click on group and it'll group the column. I guess I just grouped it twice. Let me actually ungroup it. Maybe if I just ungroup it I can show you how to group it. There we go. So you go here and you go to group and then when you go to print it, it'll just collapse. See, so it's not even there. Also, I centered this over merged and centered it, so we went over this before, but I grab it, I run it across all three columns, I click on the merge and center function, and this cough drop seems to be working, and then that way it's centered across all three columns. So I did that for Target and for Walmart. Interestingly enough, you see that, I mean, everyone sort of, at least those of us that know these companies sort of feel that Walmart is the elephant, right? The big one. This is a more powerful, better equipped company, and it is. Although, surprisingly, you see that their current ratio is actually in a very precarious situation. They don't have as much current liabilities, or current assets, as they do have current liabilities, so they don't have the ability to extinguish those very easily. Remember, the average across all industries is 2 to 1. Neither company's at 2 to 1, Target's close, but Walmart isn't even at 1 to 1. So if I were writing this up and I was using Walmart as my base company, I would say that Walmart's in a very precarious position in that they don't have enough current assets to satisfy their current liabilities. Receivables turnover. In the project I mentioned you're supposed to use just net sales. Technically you're supposed to use net credit sales in this formula, but companies will not disclose just the credit sales. They're just going to give you all sales. So in your projects, just go ahead and use net sales in place of net credit sales. Again, we were given average net receivables, but in your projects you will not be given average net receivables. You're going to have to do this that I described earlier. Set up a reference down below to explain how you got those numbers. Receivables turnover, along with all turnover ratios, are expressed in times. The more times we turn them over, and again, you might want to describe this in your projects. You have to assume the person reading this doesn't know what receivables turnover is. So if you want to define it for them and then make some analysis points on it, what this means is that means Target is able to originate and collect their receivables roughly 9 times per year. Whereas Walmart, and some of this is skewed because remember we're using total sales, not just credit sales, is 115 times, substantially more. So they're much more efficient in collecting their receivables, which of course makes them more liquid. A common representation of receivables turnover is what's called average collection period. This is also known as days in receivables. All this does is just basically represent the ratio in a more operational context. So instead of showing it as number of times per year, it tells you how many days it takes before the company can collect on their receivables. You can see obviously Walmart has a substantial advantage here. And you want to mix up your analysis and your facts presentation. So here I might say something like, it's approximately 10 times faster, right? So 10 times 3 is 32, so it's a little over 10 times faster that they're able to collect their receivables. That's a significant advantage. Yeah, question?
What is the Walmart 5.3 one? Besides Walmart 5.7.
Say it again?
The number is 5.3, but the right side is...
Oh, I put the wrong... Okay. I don't know. I'm assuming it's a mistake, Jordy, but yeah, I don't know. Let's see which is the correct number. Well, it should be 115.3. Thank you. So actually, that brings up a good point. Let's try to take my mistake and learn something from it. What I'm doing over here in this column is I'm representing the ratios. Those are ones that are going to print. So you need to be careful, and obviously I wasn't yesterday, to make sure that the calculated numbers, this is a hard-coded text box. Okay, so some of you guys are better in Excel than me, and you can actually convert this numeric value to a text function and tie it. I actually don't even know how to do it. I'm not going to waste time on it. So somebody in quality control should go back and do what Jordy and probably what Laura was going to say. Is that right, Laura? You can say, yeah. Go back through here and make sure nobody keyed something in wrong like I just did. Okay. And you have 5 people in your team for a reason, or 4, because one person can act as quality control and make sure everything works. By the way, before you pick up somebody's Excel file and use the template, you better make sure they did it right. So I'd go back through and check all the formulas to make sure they're doing everything correctly, because if one person puts forth a bad spreadsheet and everybody copies it, now you've compounded a mistake multiple times. So maybe it goes to quality control first, and then it goes to the rest of the group. You structure your groups however you want. I'm just giving you ideas. So here, what we're doing in collection period, we basically just divide receivables turnover into 365. And again, the fewer number of days here, the better. So with receivables turnover, the more time, so the higher the number, the better. With average collection period, the lower the number, the better. And then we'll go ahead and look at inventory turnover. Again, we're grabbing cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. Here, we want to turn inventory as much as possible. Again, I think everyone that knows the Walmart model knows that what it is. It's a volume-based business. They try to turn as much inventory as possible. They sell it at lower prices in hopes to generate more revenue by volume, even factoring lower prices. And so you see here that, again, I don't know what I would say is maybe it's, 33% better or a third better. They're a third better at turning their inventory than Target is. And then when it looks in days, again, mixing it up, I might say it takes about a month and a half for Walmart to sell their inventory, whereas it takes Target almost 2 full months. Just try to mix up your language if you can. Don't make it awkward, but if you can do that. So some teams will choose at the end of this to go ahead and and I don't want to send this to you because I don't want you to steal my format. I want you to do it yourself. So I can't. But when you're done with maybe the liquidity ratios, so liquidity ratios are over right here. We're only dealing with 5. We're doing current ratio, receivables turnover, average collection period, inventory turnover, and days in inventory. Okay. Some teams decide to make sort of sort of an intermediary summary based on liquidity only. I actually don't care. I've seen it both ways, and I'm happy with it both ways. But some teams decide to do that. And so if I were going to discuss this, remember that you have to always maintain the voice is the base company. Don't let, if somebody in quality control reads it and says, which company are we evaluating here? It means you're talking too much about the other companies. You should always talk about your base company with respect to the other ones. Okay, imagine an executive doesn't want to hear all about Target that works for Walmart. They want to hear about how Walmart relates to Target. So if I were to write this from the perspective of Walmart, I would say, look, Walmart is dominating Target in their turnover ratios. Again, I might make some summary comments that they're able to turn the receivables over, 20 times faster than Target. They're able to turn their inventory over at a rate, a 33% better rate. So, obviously, and this is where you sort of make some comments, obviously the business model seems to be working here in terms of being able to transact large volumes of inventory quickly, and then we're also not being hindered by that large sales volume. Our customers seem to be paying us back, even though our sales are much more substantial than Target's, in a much more favorable rate. I would say the one area of concern, which is pretty major, is that the current ratio is below 1, so it's nowhere near the optimal level of 2. And so I would say that from a liquidity standpoint, the good news is inventory and receivables are being turned over quickly. The bad news is it's still not generating a substantial enough current ratio, and that equals a potential bankruptcy risk. Any questions about the liquidity ratios? Okay, so if you wanted to, then you would go ahead and start discussing the profitability ratios. Some teams decide to do a little introductory paragraph to introduce the profitability ratios, defining what profitability ratios are. Please, everyone, hear my words there. Do not quote the textbook. If you copy the definition for profitability ratios, I don't care. In the business world, we don't quote sources on silly stuff like that. So if you want to copy word for word what a profitability ratio is, that's fine. I would prefer you do a little bit of wordsmithing and use your own words, but I'm not going to fault you for plagiarizing a definition. Okay? We have 4 profitability ratios that we're being asked to complete here. The first one is something we've been doing for a long time, and that's profit margin. So the textbook says you take net income, you divide it by net sales. And here you can see that Target's net income is quite a bit smaller than Walmart's. It's about, what, 1/6 of it. And then the sales, of course, are much more substantial at Walmart than they are at Target. That's their business model, that they're very effective at executing. What might surprise some of you is that Target's actually more profitable than Walmart from a profitability perspective. The margins at Walmart are substantially low, and because of that business model, their profit margin does lag behind Target's. So if you only looked at one measurement, profit margin, you'd say Target's the better company. If I'm arguing for Walmart, I'd say, well, wait a minute, let's look at some other profitability measurements, one of which I believe is much more important than profit margin, and that is return on equity, at least if I'm going to be an investor. When we look at asset turnover, and you'll see this in your book, but asset turnover we discussed in Chapter 10 measures efficiency of assets to generate sales. So we acquire assets as a business for one reason, that is to try to generate revenue. And if you look here, that Walmart's much more efficient with their assets, generating sales than Target is. So to try to break up the monotony of this lecture and leave something for tomorrow, because I want to break in 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to tell you a good story as soon as Juliana turns off her thing.
Okay.
Can have a story out in the world.